just because something bad happens to you doesn't mean that's it, that you are going to be broken forever. You are actually statistically more likely to become back better.
You talk about post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic growth. So can you talk me through that, what that
Yeah.
looks like and what that is?
Yeah, what would upset me is that whenever everyone would talk about the military, particularly Army or Special Forces, the narrative was pretty negative, like, oh, PTSD, and there's these guys must be really messed up, and why would anyone want to do that job? You just end up with PTSD. But what I was seeing was a bunch of highly functioning, very smart, very sane men. That was my experience. Like, there were a few that, of course, had seen the worst of the worst, but comparatively with what they'd seen, I thought they were coping pretty well, actually. And I was like, well, this is not resonating, this whole PTSD narrative. And so then I got really interested in looking at, because I'm not interested in dealing with PTSD because it's just not where my passion is. I was really wanted to deal with making good people better rather than making damaged people normal. And so I started to researching the concept of post-traumatic growth. And, when people have a catastrophic episode in their life, something that's, utterly significant, the data shows 60% of people actually come out of it better. Like, they have a better perspective on life. They are more motivated to do good things. It really kind of, knocks out any bullshit out of them, because they're like, wow, I just came very close to death, or I've seen people lose their lives like that. I need to really readjust my perception on life. And so that's what I was seeing. And I think just like, your physiology gets inoculated by a little bit of virus, that's what inoculation is. If you are inoculated with small amounts of stress or trauma, it actually shocks you into thinking about how you can be better, stronger, more resilient. And so this is what we were teaching. We were teaching, like, just because something bad happens to you doesn't mean that's it, that you are going to be broken forever. You are actually statistically more likely to become back better. So when I was teaching all of my stuff, we never talked about mental health disruption. We talked about performance optimization. We talked about how to make yourself better. Because a lot of these guys did not want to talk about the PTSD or, being broken, or even the word resilient. I didn't really use that too much, because resilience means that something bad happened and you were coming back. It was like, hey, you guys are incredibly, capable. You do the hardest things on the planet. Let's try and make you better. And in essence, what I was talking about was the same things that would stop you or get you out of PTSD, but I just didn't use that broken language. I use that performance language, the optimization language. And I think that that's a really important story to tell. And, if I had stayed there and spent a lot more time doing that work, I really would have been saying, we need a public relations campaign and stop this narrative and start showcasing men who are doing really well, who are shining beacons, who should be, the role model, not only for other guys in the military, but for young boys and young girls who just think, I'd really like to do that, but I don't want to end up broken. And I think it's so many incredible stories of men who have just done amazing things and have done so well.
I interviewed Tim Thomas the other day, and exactly that, like, he was in Afghanistan and saw the worst things, but he's come back and he's helping people, and he's strong and he's positive and he's got a good thing going on. And he told a story about ego, and he said he realised what coffee did for people, and so he thought,
he never drank coffee.
I'm going to take coffee to everybody. And so he made coffee for his team, and he thought, now, what, if I do this, they're going to think that I'm less than them, but I have to let that go. And so they called him the brew bitch. But he said they would drink the coffee and he would just see them change in in their thought and
Yeah.
what they were doing and how they saw things, and they relaxed, and
Yeah.
you know, they weren't in Afghanistan anymore. While they had that cup of coffee, they were in their little coffee shop in, you know,
Their moment,
with their
yeah.
partner, or
Yeah.
But so that was really interesting. So it's interesting you say that about the growth, because I saw that firsthand with him.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
amazing.
you think it's people who've had cancer and come back, they do better. You know, I think, like, I know for myself, when, like, one of the most difficult parts of my life was having a marriage breakdown. And honestly, like, if I hadn't experienced that, I definitely would not have grown in the ways that I'd grown. I was forced to grow. So I think that we've got to stop this, you know, narrative that if something bad happens to you, that's it, you're broken for life. I really disagree with it.
Because you can't have things good all the time either, can you? And
You need
everybody's going to go
contrast.
through stuff, and you're right, it's
Yeah.
what makes us better people. And
Yeah, and I think you need a roadmap, a pathway, or a narrative, or like you need to get into vernacular, the language of growth. And I think that, unfortunately, a lot of people have woundology, so they're bonded by their suffering, they're bonded by their victimhood, they're bonded by being, like, being broken's better than being invisible. And people don't want to be invisible, so it's easiest to go, I'm broken, I'm a victim, I'm suffering, because that's all you hear. Where if you just teach people to say, I've grown from this, I've got so much out of this, it's made me have a greater perspective, it's made me see different horizons, I've experienced parts of my psyche that I never knew existed. I think that's what we need to be propagating out there. I mean, you've got to have the cold to feel the hot. You've got to have the contrast. None of us can be naive to think that we're going to swan through life with that, you know, living in a feathered nest. And in fact, you know, a little bit of stress is very good for you. Physiologically, it's very good for you. And you shouldn't protect your children, like, you know, from everything. They need to be hardened, you know, to withstand the winds of life.
tell me why